yet I could never share this experience with my wonderful mother or brother, and kept it secret for many years. I did not want her to be hurt by what she would call absolute nonsense. As far as I was concerned, she was right, especially after what I was yet to discover as the years rolled by. I could not talk about the reality of things, for I never had the chance to clarify matters, and therefore I could only remain a brother for those who would not be bothered about the issue, even when I attempted to tell them that I was not dipped into the water like those others. But later in Istanbul, I had an experience of water baptism, which I did not consider as the way Shahan chose to believe. I will tell you more in a while. Later I was told by a number of witnesses that I could never be unbaptized member with my knowledge and insight. In reality, sharing some of their activities, such as attending meetings in their kingdom halls, was of no concern, for they could not convince me to believe in things which had no true meaning or any provable or logical grounds. One day, I thought, this issue will be clarified. But for a short while, playing the game of necessity proved itself very beneficial. Here was an opportunity to escape more important matters needing desperate measures. And this seemed to be the best way so far. From then on, Shahan, like those others, continually introduced me to people, and even amongst themselves as their brother. They did so when Siegfried and Ruth visited Ankara. Speaking of Shahan, he was a little too extreme with some of his attitudes towards others. It was very unusual, for one would expect a servant of the Lord, as he proudly declared himself, to be more meek and tolerant to others, but I did not know much about his background, for he was extremely secretive, and out of respect I did not question him. Early one morning, when I visited him, as he wanted to see some of his friends with me, where French language skills would be needed, he wanted to show me how best one should shave one's facial hair first. Interestingly, I was starting to have small amounts of fluff on my face, needing to shave to look neat and presentable. Ideally, something like that should be considered by one's own father. But did I have a caring father? On the other hand, Shahan was a person who felt the need to correct the ways of everybody. He might have felt that perhaps the historic Jesus was doing the same. This was very unusual for the witnesses, as they do not consider Jesus as important as their governing body. One other time we were at the beach holidaying in Istanbul, when his brother asked me to lie on his arm if I found it hard to put my head on the sand when I wanted to suntan, but I preferred to swim instead. I discovered that when they went to the beach, they wanted to suntan most of the time. There were other relatives and young witness brothers who would lay on each other's arms when they did not have a towel with them. At the time, I took it to be a local custom, but preferred not to participate. For one, it would be like having an undesirable contact, and I did not desire any such closeness with anybody. However, when in the sea, Shahan would jokingly say that after being dipped into the water, I could consider myself as having been formally baptized. Later I learned that every candidate was specifically asked 2 questions, and the answers would be binding on them as if signing a contract. He was asking me those very questions for me to answer. Noticing it, his brother told me I was now a proper brother in faith. Oh well, whatever you say, my friend. Some of the memories of my school days are remembered fondly. I often attempted to play the grand piano upstairs by the railings, but some of the music teachers were not too keen to see a student at the piano, always telling us not to touch it. However, as adamant as I was, one day I decided to play Chopin's Impromptu, for it was one of my favorites, and my piano teacher had been complaining about me always doing it my own way. But as I progressed, a number of teachers gathered listening to my recitals. I thought I was about to be told off, but instead they applauded, and my music teacher was so astounded she wanted me to continue during that unforgettable lunch break. This led to further performances. Another time, due to having a mild flu, I could not go to school, and the teacher asked the class to learn a poem to recite in class the next day, which I did not know about. But when at school, the teacher asked me to recite the poem I had not learnt. I stood there, almost sweating with embarrassment. But suddenly everything went dark, and in that instant I became aware of the entire page with the poem in question typed in bold letters right in front of me. Feeling somewhat privileged and obliged, I read it loudly. When the whole class applauded, I realized that I was rewarded with a good mark for my efforts. I could not say what had really happened. Much later I heard my childhood friend clearly telling me that he could not allow the embarrassment of his dear friend. What I saw was not visible to others, and had certainly not learnt that poem. My childhood friend proved once again that he was real. Another memory creeps up from time to time, but it no longer disturbs me. There was a time when Shahan asked for my forgiveness out of the blue. Not knowing what it was, I could not understand what I had to forgive him for. He waited a moment or two for my reaction. I looked at him as if to ask why I had to forgive him. He repeated himself, again asking me to forgive him. I asked him what it was he thought he may have done wrong against me. All kinds of thoughts passed through my mind. Did I do the wrong thing by trusting him as a friend? Was it perhaps him calling and introducing me as a dedicated brother, without considering my possible wishes, not to be called that way? Was it perchance him being unfairly critical of me? Uneasily waiting for an answer, I kept silent for a brief moment. Then, with a voice which sounded as if he was crying, he said, "As a servant and a minister of God, we are commanded to be pure in our thoughts, but I am afraid I failed at that. Within my thoughts I have sinned against you and the other young boy. I am so embarrassed to talk about it. At this age, as I am now, I am still masturbating, and I know it is a major sin, because the Lord commands his servants not to have any lustful thought or feelings." It certainly was something new for me, and so I said to him that I believed everybody would do that. For me, it was part of one's discovery of one's own body, and did not know that it was a sin. No, he said, it is truly more serious than that. You see, I find young boys about your age more attractive than the opposite sex, and so, just like the other boy, I tend to think of you a lot, and how it would be to have sex together while I masturbate. I was so shocked to hear something like that, and could say nothing. He continued, "This is why I am asking your forgiveness. I have questioned some higher-ranking elders, and they pointed to Bible texts where we are commanded to talk about these matters when appropriate, and when we have a problem with our brothers and sisters, to solve it. I will have to talk to the other young brother also. Please forgive me." Here was a miserable man, whom I trusted like an elder brother, crying like a child, begging for my forgiveness. I looked at him knowingly, and kept silent for a short while. Then, like an old wise man, I said, "I am sure there are many people who may be thinking lustfully about other young ones, but we can never know what they are thinking unless they open up and speak about it. You must know that I am only interested in the opposite gender, and hope it is not a shock for you. To me you are like an elder brother, and I respect you for that, but since you are so sincere and sorry about your thoughts, I will forgive you, and please sin no more." He answered me, saying, "You spoke like Jesus would have done," and kept crying for a while. I believe the other boy he referred to was Vahan's younger brother. This story always reminds me of one of my experiences when I was still at primary school. After having had a bath, drying myself in front of the long mirror, observing my body from different angles, my mother opened the door a little to ask if I had finished washing, but interpreted my standing in front of the mirror wrongly. She contacted her sister's beloved sons Antoine and Georg to talk to me about the wrong I was supposedly committing. In the evening, both brothers came to make fun of me and laugh about my masturbating, but I had no idea what they were talking about. The next day, my mother and aunt took me to a psychologist to talk to me about this urgent issue. I still cannot understand why they were so concerned about this, for they did not follow any religious dictums. The doctor advised me to keep my hands outside the bed cover when sleeping, and not to touch my body below the belt for health reasons. Caressing my hair, he told me that I could do so only when I was in his office next time. I had the feeling he thought he had mildly hypnotized me, as I was to discover much later. I was shocked and did not know what to do. However, this turned me into a harmless rebel, as I was introduced to my own natural sexuality. Now I was even more interested in all the girls I met, instead of supposedly playing with myself, as they claimed. At the time of my mother's discovery, I was not doing what she interpreted. My cousin's behavior was unwelcome, and more childish than one could imagine, and the psychologist's advice unbelievable. I wondered if my mother knew what was happening. Going back to the shocking discovery about Shahan, I advised him to read the passage in the Bible where they were told that to be married with a woman would be better than burning in hellfire. He said he was going to marry an African beauty, so slim and so tall in the new system when the time came after Armageddon. In the meantime, there was a lot of preaching to do before the end, and we were obliged to teach the world all about the truth. Shahan preferred to remain a bachelor for the rest of his life. He decided to remain a teacher to others, convinced that the truth was the only way. But was he also to remain a friend, not pursuing a homosexual lifestyle? After I left the country, I cannot say what happened to him. I can only hope that some good things have happened and that he is happy with his life. What I discovered was that homosexuality is a taboo and not supported by the witnesses in the strictest possible way when listening to their sermons. I also know that they have taken this issue a little further, exaggerating it more than normally expected. For example, using moisturizing creams on a male face, or the coloring of a man's hair, even growing one's hair a little longer, could be considered as a sign towards corruption of good character. Furthermore, I was strictly preached to that masturbation was a direct sign of homosexuality and was not approved of Jehovah. Therefore, such possible candidates would be strictly warned and chastised. Ever since that time, my association with him became less, and after leaving, although many years passed, I have not heard anything from him. Then I drifted back in thought to the railway station in Vienna, where some inspections were carried out, and we were encouraged to spend time enjoying snacks and hot drinks. I was so happy about leaving it all behind. A huge weight was lifted from my shoulders. Now I could look for some kind of future, discovering new things about life, educating myself independently, and traveling to places. But how was I going to deal with my assumed interests in the witnesses' truth? The best policy would be to tell what was real. That is, if they would listen. However, if nobody amongst them could understand, how could I continue with the pretense I was forced into? I heard my childhood friend advising that there could be a lot at stake if they knew the reality at this time, and it would be better to play the game for a while. There would be no harm to anyone in this. Besides, these lovely people had a certain weakness, and they believed in things they had been taught as being the only truth, and would not attempt to listen to reason. So I took this advice and kept playing the game.